When we talk about the Great Depression that started in 1929, and obviously capitalism went into crisis around the world, it was a global depression. And of course there were different solutions positive to this. One was of course like Roosevelt's New Deal, and then another one emerged in Germany that was supported by many US plutocrats, which was a form of a fascist rule to save capitalism through an authoritarian government. And as we see today, the economic crisis that we're in on the planet, a very detrimental situation that we're in, we're seeing, for example, the increase in imprisonment levels, and that's exactly what the Nazis did. We're seeing in the U.S. that increasingly young people are being criminalized and put into prison, and that's a way for them to enslave labor. They have people now working on like 20 cents per hour in prison in the United States, in a similar way that people were incarcerated in Nazi Germany. And so I think there's a lot of parallels, and I think that we're going to see increased authoritarian government. We've gone from disaster capitalism to terror capitalism. We're in a situation now where the wars are offered as a solution for our government, because they can stage provocations and then mobilize the masses for a reduced standard of living, premised on the concept that we have all these enemies abroad who are trying to kill us. These enemies are largely fabricated. For example, the concept of Al-Qaeda is a largely government-produced illusion. And so I think what we're going to see is very similar to what the Nazis did, where they tried to save capitalism by doing permanent war. The U.S. developed a permanent war economy in World War II, and straight away after World War II they were into Korea and Vietnam, and then we ended up with the 9/11 wars after the fraudulent trigger incident of 9/11, which clearly was a staged event. And obviously the Pentagon doesn't like to have its budget cut. One way for the U.S. to try and save its economic situation and help its people would be to reduce the grotesquely vast amounts of taxpayers' money which are funneled into the Pentagon so they can maintain this permanent war economy. But the Pentagon doesn't like to have its budgets cut. The State of Israel, of course, doesn't like the Pentagon to have its budgets cut, because the State of Israel likes the U.S. intervening in the Middle East and smashing up this or that Arab and Muslim country, because Israel wants all its surrounding countries weak, and Israel can mobilize a lot of support in the economic community for that. And so I think what we're going to see is time and time again in the future staged provocations. For example, what's going on in England now, is this just an organic and spontaneous occurrence, or is this something that's pre-planned, staged in order so the British government can justify rounding up vast swathes of the working class in Britain in order to imprison them? Whenever capitalism's gone into crisis in history, you see working class people arrested and criminalized and put in prison, because that's an easier way for the people in power, the oligarchs, the elites, the capitalists, to control the masses. And then when the capitalist economy revives itself, we'll see that reserve army of labor released back into society. Likewise with wars, you get young men and women into military uniforms, so they have employment, and you have the military-industrial complex pumping out weapons. War is good for capitalist economics, and so we're going to see more false flag terrorist attacks, I believe, more fraudulent trigger incidents in order to justify this era of terror capitalism as the global economic system descends into this malaise.